How's it going, everyone? Dylan here from AYCB with Carlo from AYCB, and today we're going to be talking about our favorite two-player only games. So this isn't just like the best games that we think that play with two. These are the games that you can only play with two, and we're each going to give our top five, and we're going to give you a little bit of explanation on why that is. So, Carlo, do you want to let people know why you chose, or like what your criteria was? For
Yeah, sure. Well, a lot of these games I find when I'm playing these two-player games, like what I like about these two-player only is kind of they feel like because they've been designed specifically for two players, there's kind of this like back and forth tension. If it's either like a tug of war or something, like it feels like that kind of closed loop system that was designed specifically to have that more head-to-head interaction.
Yeah.
So I find my favorites when it comes to those tend to be either ones where it's like really, really tough decisions, or it's a really relaxing game where you can kind of just chat with someone and kind of like it's an activity to do together.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you?
The thing I noticed with mine is that all the boxes are small.
Yeah, of
It's
course,
none of
yeah.
the big
Me
box
too,
games for
actually,
mine. So they're not like super complex games. There's a lot of strategy in them. I think in some cases, some of these two-player games, these two-player only games have even more strategy,
Right.
the way that they're built. But they're small box games. They can usually be played, fairly quickly. I would say that none of them really take longer, I don't think, on my list than an hour, and I think most of them would fall in like the
Right.
half-hour range even, especially once you know the rules.
I think
But
mine are the same actually.
yeah, so I think that's sort of you'll get a little bit of an idea of sort of what we like in two-player games as you see them, and there will be some crossovers on this list. A lot of these two-player games we've played together over the years, or introduced to people because we played them for the first time together. So you will probably see a couple crossovers on here, but we'll each have our own individual thoughts, and we won't spoil the crossovers if someone says a game that's going to be on their list later. You
Exactly.
can expect that later. So without further ado, should we just jump in?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I'm gonna kick things off with my number five. So again, this is our top five two-player only board games. So my number five is Fox in the Forest.
Nice.
This one, I went back and forth between Fox in the Forest and Jaipur. Two really great two-player only games that I really, really like. Jaipur, the only reason it's on this list is honestly over time, and I played it a little bit recently online too. I tired of it a little bit, and I think that happens with some board games. And whereas Fox in the Forest, it's the simple mechanics, the trick taking, the abilities, everything about it just like really captivated me, and almost it still feels fresh to me.
Yeah.
So it might be I thought of that as I was putting on the list. Like I want to make sure I'm not putting a game on that isn't, is it truly the number five slot, or is it just because it's newer and fresher and
Right.
feels more unique because I played Jaipur like early on in my board gaming, tenure.
Right.
Career.
No, I know what you mean though, and I think it's a good like this one tends to have a little more like complexity, maybe a little more nuance to it. Like Jaipur is maybe like a consistently reliably good game, but I think there's a little more to this, like in terms of the thinking and
Funny thing, this is actually, I'm pretty sure this is the first trick-taking game I ever played. So when I first got this, I had no idea what trick-taking was.
Right.
And that was part of what I was learning was, okay, what is a trick-taking game? But yeah, it's super simple. After you know the rules, you can get through games really fast. The artwork on it is really, really, really gorgeous. And the abilities on the cards are fun to use. And once you start to understand the strategy and you start to like, I think the funnest thing about it, and I still don't think I've pulled it off, is that the more tricks you get doesn't necessarily equate to more points, and so
Right.
there's a way to win by getting no tricks, which I still haven't pulled off. But it's almost like that achievement thing on this game where every time I play, there's part of me that's like, should I just go for the zero tricks thing?
Right,
And
yeah.
as soon as someone notices me doing that, they like easily prevent me from doing it.
Yeah. No, it's
But
a
one of
very
these
cool
days.
scoring system, definitely, and one that we should play more because I really like it too. It's a good pick.
Yeah, so that's Fox in the Forest, number five.
Awesome. All right, my number five is Hive. So when we did we recently did a video of our top games that we love but rarely get to play, and I think this was my number one on that. I think I mentioned in there, like, I haven't played this probably in like 3 or 4 years now, and I sat there, I was like, how can I put a game on my list of top two-player games that I haven't even played in years, but like, I couldn't, as much as I tried to be like, it doesn't belong there, I was like, no, it has to be on the list because I really do like it the times I've played it, and it's just a game that I admire so much in terms of the design and how much it does with so little. For those of you who don't know, it's similar to like a chess-style abstract game where you have these pieces that have insects on them. Each player has identical pieces, and you're trying to basically surround the other player's queen bee, and when you have your queen bee surrounded, you lose. And you're building them out in this hive that can't be broken apart, but once you put your insects out, they can move around, and so the shape of this hive changes, and it's such a cool game. And of all the games on my list, even though obviously this is only number 5, I think it has the highest skill ceiling of any game
yeah,
on my list,
totally.
in the sense that like if you came into this for the first time and you played against someone who's played like 100 times, you probably would have almost no chance. Like it's just one of those games like chess that like if you played a lot, you can get really, really good. There's like competitive scenes and strategy guides for this. It's an amazing game. Plus, it's like they say it's like it's waterproof. It's a great like bar game you can bring to pubs or whatever, and then just like wash the tiles after. And they're so
That's when you walk into a pub and you see a group of guys playing high. That's the table you want to be at.
yeah, exactly. So if you haven't tried it yet, there's an app version of it online. You can try it on Board Game Arena for free, I believe, as well. If you haven't tried it, I think it's one of those games everyone should at least try. I think everyone would at least appreciate what it's doing, even if it doesn't become your favorite type of game. But yeah, that's my number 5, Hive.
Yeah, Hive's in my collection as well. The only reason, 2 reasons it's on my list. 1, I haven't played it enough.
Right.
And 2, the theme is the antithesis of everything that I like about a theme because I have insectophobia. So the theme doesn't work, but it's not bad enough that the images on it screw me up. But I totally agree. I think it's even from what I've played, phenomenal game. Totally see why it's on the list. I wouldn't have been surprised if it was higher on your list.
Right, and there's expansions too. There's one you get with like a mosquito tile. There's one with a pill bug and stuff. So yeah, it's a game that can keep expanding on from there. So again, that's my number 5, Hive.
Sweet. All right, my number 4 is Patchwork.
Oh, nice.
So Patchwork is, I guess for me, I shouldn't say universally, this is like the original polyomino for me. It's the first polyomino I played. It was like, out of all the polyominoes I now have in my collection, it's probably this most simplistic, or at least it's one of the most simplistic. It just takes that very simple mechanic of matching polyomino pieces, combines it with a board that everyone who's ever played a board game growing up as a kid is familiar with the idea of moving around a board. And there's a couple little twists and turns in there that you have to catch on to that you might not be familiar with from other games in terms of how many turns. You don't always just exchange turns back and forth.
Right.
You keep playing until you have now passed the other player, things like that. But all things considered, the biggest draw is just, can you complete your entire board with all the polyomino pieces, or if you can't, how close can you get? And that is always satisfying. I always have a ton of fun playing it. I think I've actually only one time fully completed the board. I might as well have just glued that together and hung it up on my wall. It felt great. Patchwork's great. It's a game I can always constantly take out and play again, even though it has been surpassed in many ways by other polyominoes in my collection. There's other polyomino games that if someone said, let's play a polyomino game, I might not jump to Patchwork. But that being said, if someone said, I've never played before and I want a first polyomino game, or I really want to play Patchwork, I'm never going to go, oh, really? Mm-hmm. It's always a fun game to play. It was like, when I first saw this list, I think this was the first game I thought, okay, well, that's going to be on there for sure.
Right. Just because it's such a staple. And Uwe Rosenberg doesn't have a lot of 2-player only games. What's that one, Robin of Locksley or whatever, from a couple years ago that we haven't got to try, but I think it's the only one that we've tried. Great game.
Great introductory game too. If you're looking for, to introduce a game to your partner or to someone who maybe isn't, playing board games very often or doesn't play it, this is a great one that with the way the theme is, it's very calming, just to say, hey, try this one. It's different than, Monopoly or Scrabble and other games you might be familiar with. Great introductory game. So yeah, that is my number 4, Patchwork.
Nice. Great pick. Nice. And now on to my number 4. Which is Patchwork.
At the exact same number, too.
Exactly. So
what can you say that I haven't said? Now the pressure's on.
I would say the main thing that I appreciate, what I love about this game, because like you said, it's simple. I think the rules are 3 or 4 pages. It's there isn't a whole lot of setup or whatever. But what I love about it is it's there's 3 elements to the game. There's there's space, time, and cost, basically, right? Yeah. Because you're buying from a market of these tiles, or not a market, but you're picking one of those 3 in the row, and then every tile has a cost of buttons to buy it, as well as a number of, the hourglass, which is the time that it moves forward on the board, because in the game you have a certain number of time. Let's say it's 30 or 40 spaces, right? Yeah. And every tile that you take moves you a certain number of spaces. So some games might have more or fewer turns depending on the sort of time economy on those tiles that you take, but then also the space of them, ones that take more or less time might take more or less space, right? But then also those attributes you're always weighing against how much am I willing to pay, or am I willing to pay for that tile, because long term, if I'm paying 6 for this, am I going to, how early or late in the game are you actually going to get those patches on your quilt that have the buttons to get that engine going, right? Yeah. So I don't know, it seems like for what the rules have, it does a lot more. Yeah. But yet it's that kind of just relaxing Sunday kind of half hour, just like sit around and chat, have your cup of tea while you play a game.
Yeah.
It's definitely the least stressful one on my list. Like after this, it's all kind of like those brain burning, agonizing turns where you just like, you feel like you hate what's going on in many ways, but Patchwork makes the list just because it's the most relaxing, just consistently enjoyable, friendly game on my list. So
you heard it here first. The next 3 games, Carlo just hates on this list. He said it, you heard it, it's on camera.
You hate the feeling of your turn when it comes to, because you're just like, what do I do in like all those games?
Stressful.
Whereas this, you're just like, there's 3 tiles, I pick one, put it on a quilt, who cares if it doesn't work out?
This is the only one where you're going to be like curled up on like a really comfy chair with a blanket over your lap, a mug of coffee, a cat in your lap, and just like playing a piece. The other ones, you're just going to be like basically almost like, you know, coming to blows as you're playing, right?
No, absolutely. But yeah, just another solid, reliable one here. So that's my number 4, Patchwork.
Sweet. Okay, my number 3. This is a game called Stellar. This is a really great game. I love it. And it's honestly one that over time, as I'm able to play it more, I could see this rising actually. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if it was, you know, number 2 or number 1 on the list, because the things I love about this are present in 1 and 2, as you'll see. So Stellar is how do I describe it? It's like each player has 2 telescopes, okay? And in those telescopes, you're going to be placing cards that are of different categories. There's like, you know, comets and black holes and a bunch of different categories of cards. And every time you pick a card from this row, you're going to have to place 1 into your telescope and 1 into your notebook. And the notebook and the telescope work in, you know, tandem to be able to score you points. So you have to be able to get runs of numbers in your notebook, and then that's multiplied by the number of stars that are on cards in your telescope. So you're constantly balancing.
You're trying to match colors too?
Yeah,
to
totally.
multiply them and stuff. It's
Every
crazy.
category has a color. So you're basically in each of the 5 colors trying to see if you can, how many points you can score. You can't go for them all. You spread yourself too thin. So you have to just try to get the most points you can. But the most interesting part of that, because I've seen this that whole thing I just described is present in other games, but it's the way that you have to play the cards into your notebook and into your telescope. Like you're constantly having to make a decision where when you take this card, that's going to trigger you having to also take this card. And so you have to think, oh, I might want this card, but do I also want that card? And yeah, maybe I do, but I don't want to place it in the place where it's going to go, because if you place 1 card in your notebook, the second card has to go in your telescope. And so you're constantly balancing, how do I do this, and how do I structure my turn so that the cards end up where I can have them maximize my points. And it's a really thinky game. You're constantly struggling. You can never get it perfect, but you feel really good when you accomplish what you want to. I've played it, you know, I would say about 10 times, maybe a dozen times. And if I had played it, you know, as much as I've played the other 2 games on this list, it might have been higher up there, because I love every time I play it. I think the times we've played, we have this huge 5-10 minute conversation after just about how great it was.
Yeah, it's always catching me off guard.
Yeah, so very, very good game, and one that not many people might have actually heard of. It's not like a super well-known game either, so if you haven't, check it out, because it's well worth your time. So that's Stellar, number 3.
All right. And I'm going to actually need that, because my number 3 is also Stellar, this is Dylan's copy. I don't own this game, so I was kind of hoping it was coming up before, because I was going to have to grab it from your side. But what else can I say that Dylan hasn't already said? I mean, actually, this is just a 2020 game, so a lot of people haven't even heard of this because it's pretty brand new. But Matt Riddle and Ben Pinchback, they designed a ton of games. They've done, you know, Fleet the dice game, as well as Three Sisters, which was just on Kickstarter, which we've covered as well. What can I say that Dylan hasn't already? I guess, the whole game is 11 turns. Each player gets 11 turns, which is I think we realized that again when we were playing halfway through. We're like, wait a second, how do you only get 11? How do you get anything done in this game? And but every turn feels like there's so much on the line. There's so much weight to every decision. Because like you said, with which cards to take, where to put them back, kind of thing, and you kind of have your own little puzzle going on in terms of where you're putting stuff in your telescope, but you're also playing off your opponent, because you can. In your telescope, I don't know if you mentioned, but you're competing for the majorities in the different rows, kind of thing. So you're almost looking and being like, what does my opponent have going? Can I beat them for that scoring bonus there? So there's a little bit of interaction even in how your tableaus play off each other too. I think I've only played it 3 times, because again, I've only played it with you. I don't own it, but this is one that I could see going either way. I think no matter what, I'm always going to really, really like it a lot. It could be that after more plays, it even goes higher on my list. But it could be, the only hesitation I have is I wonder if after a certain number of plays, you could figure out almost I don't want to say an optimal way to play it, but like because of the math and like whenever there's games with math involved in the scoring and stuff, I kind of wonder, can you figure out like, oh, this card will have better odds of helping me here? Like, can you kind of figure it out over time? And it's just something that I don't know yet because I haven't played it enough to say.
Right.
But yeah, otherwise, I love everything about this game. It's such brutally tough decisions, but it's so rewarding, win or lose. But one thing to mention quickly, a lot of table space.
Oh.
Man, for a 2-player card game,
that's the most surprising thing about it.
Almost this whole table would be needed because the telescope is this huge thing, but...
this little box takes up more table space than some big box games I have just because of the fact you have to have your telescope in a specific shape is what causes that. But
yeah, absolutely. But I can't go wrong. Honestly, highly recommend you try Stellar. That's my number 3 2-player game as well as yours, I guess.
Great pick, I have to say.
Yeah. Is there back-to-back overlaps here? Let's see which.
How many more overlaps?
Yeah. I bet it. Maybe this next one.
Number 2 for me is Lost Cities. So Lost Cities is a game that I don't even remember when I got introduced to Lost Cities, but I have played so much Lost Cities on Board Game Arena in the last little bit.
This guy was ranked number 2. This guy was ranked number 2 on Board Game Arena not that long ago.
I was ranked number 2, and then I tried to push for number 1. Right at the end of the season, I think I dropped to like 800 or something like that. Yeah. So for a while, I was ranked number 2. But yeah, so I played a ton of Lost Cities on Board Game Arena. I played a ton of the physical version before that. It's such a great game that constantly makes you not want to take your turn. And that might sound very weird to say, but ultimately it's because there's so many decisions to make and so many tough decisions to make. And yes, sometimes they're based a little bit on luck and you don't know what you're going to draw and you don't know what your opponent's holding on to, but you have to like calculate the odds a little bit and say, I don't want to dump any of these cards right now. This one's going to help my opponent. This is going to make me lose a card I might want to play. And you have to decide which one is the lesser evil, do it, and see how things turn out. And sometimes they'll turn out in your favor and it feels great. And sometimes it's devastating, but it's still a great feeling because you're not completely ruined. It's just, that's part of the game. You have to be ready to just have these devastating turns where you're like, well, if I would have done it this way, but you had obviously no way to know. So as long as you're okay with a little bit of, randomness and luck with the way the cards come up and having, several of those moments where you're like, well, I guess I don't need this red 6, and then as soon as you play it, you draw, a red 7 or something like that, or, one of the handshake cards. Like, that happens all the time, and you're like, oh my god, again. But besides that, like, it is just a phenomenal game. I never get sick of it. It just feels so good to play and so good when you actually pull off what you want to. So.
But how does it feel when you're waiting, and you've got your like 5 or 6 cards of a color, but you don't see any of the handshakes, and you're waiting and you look in your opponent's eyes and you know exactly that they're holding it, and you wait, and then you finally go and play that like green 3, and then they just discard a handshake and discard a handshake. And does that feel good?
It feels even worse when they're not holding it, but as soon as you play the first number, you draw a handshake. Because then it's no one's fault except the fact that you just didn't have enough patience to wait one more turn. But it feels bad either way. But that happens all the time.
You feel either the game is spiting you or your opponent's spiting you. But either way, you have reason to be upset when it happens.
But yeah, Lost Cities is a great game. That is number 2, Lost Cities.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. Well.
Is it going to be Lost Cities? It's going to be Lost Cities. You have a nicer box than me, though.
Well, this is the newer one that comes with the 6th Expedition as well, I believe. Wait.
Tell us in the comments which box is better.
Yeah, 6th Expedition. Which one's yours?
Mine's not.
So yeah, this one comes with a 6th. It's just another color. Changes up the game a little bit, obviously, in terms of the randomness and stuff. But yeah, this is a Reiner Knizia classic. You tried this way before I did. I came over and tried this once a few years ago and was like blown away by this. It's got a kind of a weird scoring system. Like it is a bit mathy, and because the game plays out in 3 rounds, you have to like score the first round. Like here's the thing, playing it the tabletop version is a little more time consuming and a little more like, I don't want to say fiddly, but just like you play around, you have to count up all the scores, shuffle up all the cards, deal them out again, then do a second round. You do that 3 times. Playing online, it kind of just does everything for you, so it's much quicker, and that's, I think, why you and I have been able to play so much Lost Cities, is like this became my pandemic game of choice on Board Game Arena. I logged like 50, 60 games of this in a few months. Absolutely love the tension, the back and forth, and I'm glad that you kind of agree with me in terms of like there is luck, but the game isn't it's not too much luck, and the game isn't determined by luck.
Yeah.
But the thing, I wish the Board Game Arena ranked option could do the 3-round option, because in ranked, you only get the single round. And to me, what makes Lost Cities so amazing is the 3-round structure, because you adjust your approach every round based on how many points ahead or behind you are, or what the score is. So, like, if you go into round 2 and you're behind by 100 points already, you have to be riskier, you have to take more chances, you have to hold out to get all those, big runs in one color. Whereas, like, if you're ahead by a bit, you maybe play it safer to just preserve your lead kind of thing. So I just love this game. Every once in a while, you might feel like there's some bad luck, but for the most part, you can look back and be like, I shouldn't have thrown that card away, or I shouldn't have done this. And the fact that you can speed up or slow down the end of the game, either if you're chasing cards in the deck and you only need to draw, or you can play cards and take stuff off the board so the deck isn't depleting. Like, there's all these little decisions to make along the way. It's a strategy, and literally, it's just like a deck of cards with colors and numbers on them, aside from the handshakes. Like, it's so simple, but that's the genius of Reiner Knizia at work.
Yeah, awesome game.
Lost Cities, number 2 two-player game of all time.
Okay, time for the number 1 picks now. Am I gonna have the same pick as you here?
I don't think so.
Am I gonna ruin another one of your?
I think I know what yours is, and I think it's one that just narrowly missed my list. So
my number 1 is Seven Wonders Duel. This won't be as much of a surprise to I would imagine a lot of you, because Seven Wonders Duel is a pretty well-renowned game. It's high on the BGG hot list. That's something that you, or not hot list, the top 100.
Time. I think it's the highest ranked 2-player game of all time.
I think it is too.
It's either first or second for 2-player only. Yeah.
So a lot of people have heard about this game. It's a well-regarded 2-player game. I love it. There's probably not a lot I can say that you haven't already heard someone else say, or if you experienced yourself. It's such a great game. It's probably the longest game on this list. All the decisions you can make with the pyramid of cards that you're having to pick from, and choosing not to take a card because it's going to reveal a card for your opponent to take, and just all the decisions that come from that, while also building out your little tableau of all your resources and your points and your science technologies and all that kind of stuff. But then again, all the multiple ways to win is where it just puts it over the top to me, because it's not just who gets the most points. Like, if you decide, I'm just gonna, the way the cards flip up, I'm just going to go and pick all these cards because it's gonna get me the most points. It almost has this built-in function to eliminate the luck that can come up from the placement of cards. Because if I get lucky and all the blue cards are showing up for me, and all the blue cards just get me a whole ton of points, well, my opponent might be missing out on all those points, but they can identify, hey, I'm falling behind on the point score, but I can now try to press them really hard on military, or press them really hard on science, and try to either win that way, or make them have to back off from their game plan to stop me, and then jump in and try to grab some of the cards that they would have otherwise grabbed. Like, there's so many decisions that come in with there being 3 win conditions in the base game, and that is what makes it so much fun for me. The amount of times I played a game and felt so confident, whether it be on Board Game Arena or the physical one, and just been thinking, this is one of the best games of Seven Wonders Duel I've ever played. I've got this in the bag. I look how many points I have. They're barely getting anything, and then all of a sudden, I realize what their strategy was, and they snake this science victory, and I can't even be mad, because it's brilliant, right?
Because you think you have the upper hand in one category, you're like, I have the upper hand in military, I don't need to, but then you don't account for the science or the other condition.
Yeah, I love the multiple win conditions. I love the pyramid structure and the tableau building with everything. It all works together in unison just to create a phenomenal 2-player game. If you haven't played it, if there's one 2-player only game that I recommend on this entire list, it would depend on what kind of game you're looking for, but in general, I would say Seven Wonders Duel is a great place to start. This was the first or second 2-player only game I ever got. It was either this or Jaipur, and I've probably out of all these games, I've logged the most plays on this in the physical version. Lost Cities would be it because of Board Game Arena, but in the physical version, definitely logged the most plays with this, and it's one that will never leave my collection. I keep buying expansions for it just to find new ways to play it. So,
but this one is also on Board Game Arena, and there's at least 1 or maybe even 2 expansions on there with it, and the expansions are awesome for it too. They don't add a whole lot of rules complexity, but really, very intricate game from what it initially looks like, and I think it captures what makes Seven Wonders best, like the actual bigger set. The main Seven Wonders goes up to 7. I just like what it does by condensing it into a 2-player head-to-head duel. To me, this is the optimal version of Seven Wonders in my opinion, and it just missed my list. Honestly, it would have been like 6 or 7 on my list.
Yeah, awesome game. Yeah, Seven Wonders Duel. That's my number 1.
All right, and now my number 1 2-player game of all time. Another Reiner Knizia one, the greatest Reiner Knizia 2-player game of all time, is Battle Line. So this has been out for, I think, at least 20 years or so.
That long?
Holy
I think
smokes.
so. Yeah.
Wow.
I think it says on the back 2000 or something like that. It could even be older. I don't know about this edition, but it kind of has this like somewhat drab artwork. A lot of these games sometimes from published
20
by
years
teams.
ago.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. But honestly, such a good game. The long and short of it is, there's basically you're fighting 9 separate little battles. It's almost like 9 simultaneous poker hands where you have the deck of cards is basically just numbers and colors. I think it's like 6 different colors or 8, numbered from 1 to 10. You have a hand of I think 8 cards, and on your turn you basically just play a card and then draw a card. You play one card in one of the slots for these 9 sort of battles, and you're trying to get like all the hands end up being similar to poker, where you're getting like a run of 3 cards, like a straight or a flush or a straight flush. You know, based on the colors and numbers, you can get 3 of a kind and whatever. And you can only play a max of 3 cards to each side, and whoever has the higher sort of value will win the battle. But because you're only playing 1 card at a time, you can see someone like play a 3 like red or whatever, and you don't know if they're going to try and be going for 3 of a kind or if they're going for a run or a flush. But you don't have to play in the same line. You can play in another line. So everyone's kind of taking their turn, showing their hand a little bit. Where am I going? What am I doing? And you're trying to suss out which cards do I want to save to try and get my biggest hands? Like, which battles do I think I can pick where I think I can win? And the other thing that I love, what puts this above Lost Cities for me, is that the layout of the cards on the table, where they are, matters. In Lost Cities, the colors, you're just trying to get them in order all the time. You always are going ascending, and the colors, like, you could technically put the green pile here, the blue, whatever. In Battle Line, the win condition is the first player to either win any 5 battles out of the 9 or any 3 in a row. So even whether you're starting a battle on the far end or somewhere in the middle, you're kind of like starting out like in a more hotly contested, more valuable position potentially. And I love the aspect of sometimes you have you can beat your opponent in battle by just proving that even though they haven't played all their cards yet, that it's impossible for them to beat you. Yeah. So if you had already a 3 of a kind 10s and I had like a 9 and 10 of a color, and you were holding the 8 of that color, you know it's impossible. But until you play that 8 from your hand, you can't actually win that battle. So you're holding a card. You can't show it to me and say, look, you can't do that. It's like, doesn't matter. So sometimes you have to play a card, even if it doesn't help you, just to say, now that that's in play, I can prove that you can't beat me on that battle over there. Yeah. So there's this, it's...
Part of what you're describing, and now I'm realizing as you're saying it, like, there's elements of Lost Cities in it, in terms of the strategy. Definitely. Like, the way that you can have, like, information based on what's in your hand that your opponent doesn't know, and you can hold off on playing to certain rows to wait for your opponent to do something, to then play and kind of get them in a gotcha moment kind of thing. That whole thing, but you're doing it on way more spaces than in Lost Cities. There's much more going on.
Exactly.
Less cards in each one.
Yeah, but the other thing I didn't mention, I have to mention quickly about this, is not only is there that main deck of cards, but what takes us to the next level is, I guess it's considered part of a variant, but I think you should play. There's a separate deck of these tactics cards. There's I think 10 of them, and they're just little abilities like move one of your opponent's cards somewhere else, or change the value on one of your cards to any value. So at the end of your turn, when you play a card, instead of drawing from the regular deck of numbered cards, you can take a tactics card instead, which means you have this kind of one little ace up your sleeve. Your opponent doesn't know what it is, but you don't know what you're going to get from there either, and now you have fewer of the actual cards to choose from for your future turns. So it's kind of this risk of like, do I want to try and have one little tactics card that might get me out of a situation? One of those games I feel like nobody seems to ever want to play it with me, but I've lent this out to people during the pandemic. People are asking me, can I get some 2-player games? I lent out a bunch. This is always the one that I hear back from people that are like, Battle Line really surprised me. Mm-hmm. Everyone always singles this one out.
This is one of those ones that if they like, the way what you said about the artwork and the look of it, I think it's one of those things just working against it a little bit. I think this is one of those games that with a completely different reskin or theme on it to be updated for this modern year or whatever. But even with all the gameplay still intact,
there's a more recent one.
Is there?
I think it was last year. It's got like it's like a white box with like fancy medieval, more updated, more cartoonish.
That's all it needed.
Bright. Yeah, it definitely.
You have no excuse now. Go play Battle Line.
I might even end up getting rid of this one to get the newer edition with the nicer artwork and everything. Yeah. Like, definitely give this a shot. Obviously, my favorite 2-player game of all time, and I think I've only played it like maybe 10 times, so it says a lot, but I'll never get rid of this.
Yeah. Great choice. And I think it's very interesting that we had 2, 3, and 4 on the list were all the exact same slot and same game, but our number 1 wasn't on either of each other's lists at all. Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. And yet, I totally understand the picks, and like,
absolutely.
I just haven't played Battle Line enough to have it on my list. I think I've only played it 3 times total. Mm-hmm. If I had played it as much as I played Lost Cities, I can almost guarantee you Battle Line probably would have slotted in somewhere on the list.
Right. And it's kind of similar with me. The Seven Wonders Duel was like probably my 6, 7, 8 game, and probably would have been higher if I'd played it more. But yeah. Otherwise, anything else that you expected to see on my list that didn't make it, or anything that was
No, I honestly
narrowly missed your list?
I completely forgot about Battleland. I thought for sure it was going to be Seven Wonders on yours, and then when you pulled Battleland out, it was one of those like, oh, of course, like that. Yeah.
Right.
I know you have a couple other 2-player games that and even I do that have a chance of making the list that we just haven't played enough or haven't played at all. One about like Curious Cargo and Watergate and Skull Call we've only played once.
It was really good, but we haven't played it enough. We just tried Undaunted North Africa the other day too. Yeah, and you mentioned at the beginning of the video, like some of those long epic ones, like we haven't played War of the Ring or like Twilight Struggle or some of these epic like 2 to 3 hour, 4 hour 2-player games. So maybe that's kind of the next step for us is like move on from the small box card ones and maybe try like a more intense, long, heavy 2-player game. So
yeah, for sure. This is just based obviously on the games that we've played, and we're playing more 2-player only games every month now. So this list is definitely going to evolve, and at some point in the future we'll probably do it again, and we'll have different picks, but in the 5 as we've added new games to it. So
but this is as of April 2021. These are our top 10. Well, I shouldn't say top 10 because our top 5 each had quite a bit of overlap. I guess that's our top 5, our top 7.
Yeah, it's like 7 total.
So 7 total games, but those are ours. So we're curious. Let us know in the comments what games did any of these make your top 5 list, or what games do you think we should really try out? And also keep an eye out in the next couple months. We'll probably do a counterpart video to this where we look at games that can play with more than 2 but that are best with 2. I guess I won't spoil. I was going to compare one, give an example. But we'll save that for the video. Yeah. So let us know below which games we missed, which one are your favorites. Otherwise, anything else you want to add?
Nope, you said it all. That was
awesome.
great.
Well, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.
See ya.